Now, you mentioned when you were in college. Now, how did you make the college decision? Where did you go?
Oh, I went to State University of New York at Albany. I can tell you as a father now with two kids who are in college, we drove with each of the girls to about 10 different schools to look.
Yeah, how did that happen when you were going?
It didn't.
Did your parents have any feelings about your going away?
Well, first first it was assumed that I was going to do what my brother did. My brother went to Herbert Lehman College, Hunter in the Bronx, and it was just assumed I was going to stick around.
That was,
yeah.
Did they get nervous or be anxious when you weren't there? I mean, was there concern about your safety as you got older and were going out?
Oh, I didn't go out much. I was very
you were
much...
going out to school, at
Yes,
least down
I
the
was
hill
going out
to
to
John
school.
F.
Yes.
and...
Yeah. My mother, again, working in the South Bronx, was not that nervous about my experience. Even though, there was a substantial, JFK was a tough school, but it was relatively safe. She was more, she was also the kind of mom who never pushed academics on me. She said, you take things at your own, I want you to play. Arnie, why are you doing homework after school? Go play basketball. It was just her way, she didn't want pressure. I'll tell you a funny story, if I may, for just a minute. I took the test to get into the specialized high school, Bronx Science, and I actually got in. And between the time that I took the test and would have received the acceptance notice, my mother called Bronx Science and said, I don't want him going there. You send him a letter saying he failed. Which I got. Oh, absolutely. I know people I tell this today are shocked. So I actually got in and she called the school.
How did you ever find out what she had done?
She admitted it later,
Oh my goodness.
Just another story to tell you what my mom is like. In 1972, still in first year of high school, right, I went with my brother Yuda, who was 7 years older and just finished college, to England. We went, we had reservations at a bed and breakfast. When we got there, it was horrible. The room was disgusting. So we took our bags and we walked down the block and found another bed and breakfast like 5 buildings down. There's a point to this story. A few days later, while we're in, and we never bothered to call my parents and tell them we had moved. No cell phones, no nothing at that time, right? So we go down the block. A few days later, what happens? The IRA bombs the Tower of London, kills about 20 tourists. We still didn't call my mother. That night, at our bed and breakfast, we get a knock on the door, and the innkeeper comes to us and says, your mother's on the phone. She had actually called the original bed and breakfast, who told her, we don't know where they went. She must have had them expand out and give her the phone numbers of all the other bed and breakfasts on the block until she found us. That was my mom.
She was concerned.
Yes,
but I think rightfully so. And it doesn't seem like undue anxiety about your well-being or your safety. What about health? Were there concerns about your health or their health?
Yeah, well, first of all, my father did have concerns about safety. I was getting to that first. Like, the few times I did go out at night, like say I went to a Knick game or something or saw some friends, he would be at the door waiting. I don't know how long. He must have been at the little peephole in our apartment, because as soon as I came down the hallway, it could have been 11 o'clock, could have been midnight, the door would open and he would start screaming, and then he would start crying. So that was intense. It kind of made it a little hard to want to go out too much, because I always wanted to protect them. I didn't want them to suffer like that. So that made that a little tough. But in terms of health, I think that's where it really hit home for my mother. My mother, who now does suffer from depression, she gets these like cyclical bouts of depression a couple of times a year around the Jewish holidays. And The first time I saw that hit, I was in junior high school, and I had had a bout of the whooping cough, and I was out of school for about 2 months. And she took me everywhere. I was getting penicillin shots in the behind. I was, going to this one, that one, all these specialists. I was twice in hospitals. Finally I went to Columbia Presbyterian where they did something to get it out. My mother was a rock through the whole thing. She took me here, she took me there, she was patient. She continued to work. She'd have babysitters come because I was home. And finally, when I got better and I went to school, I think it was the first time in my recollection that she had the symptoms of what I'd now call depression. As soon as I got better, she went down.
And that has continued
And that
since.
has continued since, on and off. More now, in the past 5 or 6 years, it's, consistent now.
So you mentioned your father's almost 90 now.
My
How
father.
old is she?
She is 84.
And they're living?
Both at the Hebrew Home for the Aged in Riverdale, only a few blocks from here.
Right. So then making a decision to go away to college must have been a very difficult one.
It was difficult, but I decided I had to do it. I had to finally, I was figuring I was just going to go to City College or something like that. And the last minute I said, I can't do this. This is going to be just more feel of high school. I need to start living. I need to meet people. I was feeling very isolated.
How did your parents react to your wanting to do that?
My mother was very supportive, and my father was, if he said anything, I don't recall him saying much of anything, but what I do remember is the day that my friend came with his little car to pick me up. My mother was fine, and my father started sobbing hysterically, which was very, very difficult.
Made it hard to leave because you wanted to protect them and not make them suffer.
I couldn't stand.
And here he was, but you did it anyway. You did it.
Yeah, I had to do
You
it.
mentioned that when you were in college, you began to learn more about the Holocaust.
Yes.
Did you take courses or were you reading? What was it?
It's very interesting. It's kind of funny that way. It was through books that I kind of read outside of my classes. I took one Judaic Studies course and a couple of history courses that completely glossed over it still. This was the mid-70s. Still not really a big thing. What happened, kind of funny enough, was I had fallen in love with a non-Jewish girl. And we were together almost 2 years and were contemplating marriage. And then, for some reason, one day we had a discussion about my grandparents. And in the discussion, she had a very Catholic theological view of what happened to them, that where they were was kind of a good place to be, that they had, of course it was horrible that they had perished in such a terrible way, but I shouldn't be so upset about it because they were in a good place now. And I just couldn't accept the whole premise of her thought. There's no offense taken. It's a different cultural and theological view of the world. And I was shocked. And within a week, and this was after 2 years, we broke up. And already, when we, that's not the only reason we broke up, but when we were contemplating marriage, we started talking about children and how they would be raised. And all of a sudden, I'm starting to realize that I've got this very important legacy going on here. And it's just, I finally had the, was old enough and mature enough to start to recognize that, oh my God, my parents went through this terrible thing. grandparents perished. So many of my parents' siblings perished, and am I prepared to give that up? And my parents had told me, Arnie, don't marry her. Don't you understand what happened to us and stuff like that. And it all just kind of came together, and we broke apart, and I started reading. I read some Elie Wiesel. I read Andre Schwarzbart's Last of the Just. I read Simon Wiesenthal's one of his books about hunting Nazis. I read The Exodus and the little sub-book of that called Mila, I don't know if it's 16 or 18, by Leon Uris, about the Polish uprising. The show The Holocaust was, the miniseries The Holocaust had shown. And all of a sudden it just kind of hit me, as I think I mentioned before, like a ton of bricks. And so that's, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
as you were reading these things, did you ask your parents more questions? Did they talk to you anymore now?
I started to ask them more questions at this point when I was home. I also went to grad school, continuing on at State University at Albany. And I did start to ask my parents more questions about what was going on. And they were starting to volunteer a little more information to me. And so I was beginning to realize some of the, I had already been getting a sense of the enormity of the whole thing, and that and I was already to some extent familiar with their suffering. But again, it all came together, and it came together on a personal level, which I think I've kind of mentioned before, kind of eluded me. I don't know if I was a product of the times or whatever. I was certainly very loving of my parents. I was never rebellious. I was not a rebellious teenager. Kids were taking drugs and doing all kinds of crazy things. At that point, I would never even have dreamed of doing that because I was afraid it would cause my parents pain. So I was already very well connected to them, but not, and maybe it was related to their experience, but I didn't even realize it yet. But then again in college, it kind of all hit, and I did start to ask them more questions. I remember very specifically being home for Yom Kippur, one holiday, the Day of Atonement, and we're walking back from synagogue, and we were still wearing our yarmulke, our kippah on our head, and from a building down the block, we heard somebody from an upper floor yelling, Jew, 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 and I was like, come on down, chump, let's go for it. But my father, very interestingly, took his kippah off his head and put his head down and just kept walking, and it just, that was very powerful, and I remember there were actually, again, there were snippets. One thing in high school I remember is, there was a boy in my class, he was actually a German American, and he said to me once, he said, Arnie, I like you. You're not like the other Jews. And I go home and I tell my parents, this guy likes me because I'm not like all the other Jews. Isn't that good? And, not understanding, not really getting it at all. And my father says, that's what the Nazis used to say to me too. When they would keep me alive when I was in the concentration camp because I was doing their tailoring. They said I wasn't like the rest of them who they were exterminating. And, so it was things like that that really were very...
Were you friendly with this guy after that?
No, I told him to go to hell after that, but... I didn't realize what I was dealing with. There was also instances I remember in college. One time my mother came up, and there was, I don't know if they were German, but there were boys from upstate New York with blonde hair. And I remember my mother talking to me in front of them, very nicely saying hello to all of these boys. And the boys just looking at her and kind of laughing at her accent. And so, you know, it was instances like that, and then again, you know, and then again being with this non-Jewish woman that really, you know, brought it all home for me and got me into reading and started to get me into this connection.
Now, did your father in particular get any more used to your comings and goings as the years went by?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes and I used to come home, especially in my first couple of years. I'd be home every 2 or 3 weekends because I really missed home. You know, I was very homesick, and I would come home, and sometimes still when I was leaving on a Sunday night, he would start crying again. You know, and it's like, you know, and you'd kind of like beg him, you know, please don't cry, you know. But that time, you know, I would only call him on the phone like twice a week. You know, now I speak to them every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times. But,
did you get involved in any Jewish groups or activities at college?
Yeah, it's funny enough, you know, that's a great question because it was right at that time. You know, when I had gone out with this non-Jewish girl, I was completely focused on being with her. We did all our studying together, you know, we socialized together, whatever we did was together. And when I got out of that relationship, I started to go to Jewish, I joined a couple of Jewish groups on campus. There was a Hillel organization, there was Students for Israel. I joined that. I also took a community service internship with a rabbi up in Albany, a rabbi named Paul Silton, who had a profound impact on me because he, you know, a young American Jewish rabbi from Boston, he was, he fancied himself to a certain extent as a Nazi hunter, and did some crazy things, including going to some mainstream Jewish organization meeting in an SS uniform to try to create attention, again in the late 70s, early 80s, to the fact that they weren't really focused on survivors or hunting down Nazis, who were still relatively young at that time. And I believe it was my senior year of college, again, all in the same time, that this rabbi, he got us on national TV. He was aware of it, and he would talk to me. He would often drive me home from my internship. I was working at this, you know, like a Sunday night Jewish high school thing in Albany. And he would talk to me about, you know, Nazis and stuff like this and what he was doing. And I joined this other, like, little group of kids who were kind of, you know, very supportive of what he was doing with Nazis. We were also like very anti-Palestinian at that time. Even the mainstream Palestinians were doing a lot of terrorist acts, and you know, we were very into doing what we could to combat that when they brought a PLO spokesman to campus and stuff like that. But anyway, what this rabbi did was up in Washington County, which is north of Albany, kind of up in the Lake George area, lived a Latvian man who had lied about his role in the Holocaust to gain access, entry, and citizenship in the United States. The guy's name was Vilas Hasners. And, you know, he was a guard at it turned out he was a guard at some concentration camp. And the rabbi pushed us into doing a protest at his house. He sponsored a bus, and a bunch of us kids from the Jewish organization went up there, and, you know, we protested right outside his house. It was pretty direct, you know, no police permits, no nothing. I mean, we just went right there, you know. And that was, again, a very powerful impact in realizing all of this. You know, so I kind of gone from, you know, at least politically speaking, from a state of apathy to this state of, like, intense, you know, feeling about it all that was kind of overwhelming even, you know. And, at the same time, when I talk to my parents, I talk more about this. I also started talking more to my parents of my love of Israel, and stuff like that. I saw Israel as the ultimate Jewish response to the Holocaust, and started to take great pride in that. I went to Israel for the first time in my conscious memory at the end of my senior year in college, and if I can say it on the video, one of my favorite things about it was just seeing that so many Jews had guns. I said, because at that time I didn't understand Holocaust concepts of passive resistance and how people who went to camps and stayed alive resisted in their own way, how people who went to their deaths holding their children and being able to pray without panicking resisted in their own way. I didn't understand that in that time. The only thing that made sense to me at that point in my life was the idea of those who had resisted with guns, and then seeing all these Israelis with toting machine guns walking around. I said, this is great. I don't know if I've gotten off the subject.
That's very interesting. Do you still now feel the same connection to Israel that you felt then?
I still have a strong love of Israel. It's probably not the same level of connection. Of course, it's moderated with the idea that, I feel sad that they have to, it's still good that they're strong, and I still take great pride in their military might, but it's kind of sad that they have to have guns and be that alert for, militant or terrorist acts. So it's kind of changed a little in that way.
Did you visit in later years or take your children to visit?
I have never had the chance to take my children. I visited one more time. Both times I went there, I went to Yad Vashem. And that also had a profound impact. I remember the first time I went there again was after my senior year of college, and I remember seeing up in one of the slides, they show an American bomber. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but they showed this large picture of an American bomber dumping bombs over the IG Farben plant near Auschwitz, but yet they never hit the crematoria, they never hit Auschwitz, they never hit the rail lines, because I was starting to read and not deem those as military targets. Again, another thought that had gotten me very upset and very angry. I think at some point, in speaking to my father, and probably maybe at around the same time even, I once asked him, did you ever see the Americans, when you were in the camp? And he said the bombers would come over, which is why at his concentration camp Ebensee they built tunnels to put the munitions inside the tunnel. But he said there was times that he was so desperate or just so sure that he was going to die that he would only pray that it would be an American bomb that would kill him. Yeah. So.
Meanwhile, what were you studying in school? Well, did you have a major, and what were you interested in pursuing?
Yeah, I was studying history and political science. I had a double major in that undergrad. I didn't know what to do with that coming out, so I decided to stay there. I had also just met a Jewish girl who was a couple of years younger than me, so I had wanted to stick around.